This is Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the stories, advice, and insights behind some of the most successful people in real estate. Beyond the Resume is brought to you by Jackson Lucas Executive Search, the industry leader in human capital solutions. Here is Lisa Flicker.
Shike Goedar, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm so excited to have you here, both as a former client, friend, and neighbor. So that's super exciting.
Thanks for having me here, Lisa.
So traditionally, the listeners of this podcast are students or people who are thinking of getting into real estate. So it's going to be people who are particularly interested in hearing your story as to how you went from, and I saw you have a degree in entrepreneurship, which is interesting, how you built your career in real estate. And so would love to just get a little bit, like maybe we could just start with your younger years and what were those like?
Sure. I mean, happy to give a bit of a background. I think I've had a pretty varied background across the board in real estate. I always knew I wanted to be in real estate. In college, I interned at a couple of debt capital markets groups in Atlanta, undergrad there. So went into had a choice of really kind of going bulge bracket and debt capital markets with like an intern with JP Morgan. But actually ended up taking the path with a more local group in Atlanta now called Truist, but it's SunTrust. So it's a very smaller analyst class, like 20 people versus like the 200 plus that you would have at the JP Morgans of the world. I had an offer at like Wachovia even in Charlotte, but ended up staying in Atlanta, doing it at a smaller bank and really got to see a lot of different things. And like some of those people still kind of are, within my network even today, like for a small analyst class like that. So that was, I think, a common theme in my career is like being earlier, more involved in companies as they're building something. And SunTrust was a big bank, not a startup, but like capital markets was a newer division for them in CMBS. So I did the debt side for a while. This was like, gosh, 6, 7. So like right before getting into, an area where you had all the issues, right? Like
Right.
the CMBS, CLOs and all that stuff. But I had a seat at the table where the action was good and got to see a lot of different things. I wanted to go to the buy side, and then like, it's a 2-year program, 3-year program. So you're out like 18 months in, you're kind of looking for your next step anyway as an analyst, right? So as I was doing that and going through interviews and whatnot, had, I guess, the fortunate opportunity of finding something in San Francisco with a mortgage REIT. So that was really good timing as well, because like, the bank right after that got into the whole layoff mode of like, everybody was getting canned. And so as I actually got laid off, I had an offer to join another firm. Played out really well, but that got me on the buy side of things. So this was, what is it, 2008 now? Like we're in '08. So going to San Francisco, associate program at a mortgage REIT. They were a B buyer of all the CMBS stuff that was being sold and packaged. They had a portfolio. It ended up being mostly like an asset management job for our whole industry, right? Like, because there was no action going on. But it was a good place to be for a while. So that was at least an opportunity to stay relevant. You're seeing stuff in the portfolio as stuff is like all kind of blowing up. That really got me interested in, because we were doing like workouts and stuff like that with all the borrowers. That kind of got me interested on the real estate side, but on the equity side. I really wanted to make that move to equity, which is a hard transition. Like I met with a ton of people in San Francisco, the traditional, like your Morgan Stanleys of the world, and San Francisco's a small real estate market to begin with. I pretty much met all of them out there, and nobody was really hiring. And the first question was always like, "Oh, you're gonna go from debt to equity?" Like, the equity guys were buying anything anyway. So ended up, for one way or the other, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna apply to business school, and ended up applying to a couple of schools, Berkeley part time and NYU part time. Ended up getting into NYU, and then got an offer to join very early their partners group, like at the early stages as they were building out a real estate team again. And they weren't like as well known here in the US at the time. It was still a very small San Francisco office and a very small New York office. I did a lot of my training in San Francisco then, but ultimately relocated to New York as I was going to NYU there. So I kind of did that part time while at PG, and that was a really good experience. I got my first experience on the buy side, principal side, and the same story there was like really active. So this was, call it 2010, 11-ish. We were, JV partner on deals. I was on the direct team. They had a secondaries team and primary team as well, but doing a lot of direct deals with a very interesting cast of characters as a generalist. So really got to see a lot. And one of the opportunities being at PG, where it's a bigger shop in the corporate PE side, you also got to see a lot on that side of the business. So participating in IC meetings and like hearing all that kind of discussion. So again, I guess I was one of 20 at the time in the real estate team in the US. So again, really small group, but that was a common theme in my background. So I thought that served me well as I was kind of building up my career. But yeah, from PG, again, like you mentioned, entrepreneurship, so a couple steps before, but switched to North Star because I wanted to get more involved on platform, doing directs and like, doing platform kind of company opportunities. That company was also going through a transition from being it was founded by Hamamoto and it was a small kind of mortgage REIT, but David's background was more principal P at Whitehall. So he was always like running it as what I would say is a public upfront almost, right? We got to see a lot there. And the transition from North Star was really interesting. When I joined, they were really coming out of their predominantly credit side of the house into more equities. So it was a kind of a rocket ship when I joined because like we were just at the time, getting into the manufactured housing space, industrial, which I spent a lot of my time at partners, but then really accelerated at North Star buying a lot of industrial deals there. But yeah, that was a cool opportunity. Small team again too, right? Like one investment team in New York. So you got to see a lot. So to round out the whole entrepreneurship thing, I mean, where I'm at right now, I'm running the industrial platform here at Arden. I'm the president chief investment officer, but that wasn't a job. That was like an entrepreneurship path that I created as I was looking at an opportunity, and that started, from the ground up. So like today, that's company ALP, Arden Logistics Park, 60 people, managing a portfolio of $1.5 billion of industrial, but I got to participate really from the ground up, like buying the first building and coming in, day one. So like that was kind of special to see. But so that for people who are starting out earlier, as like just I think the name brand recognition is often something that like people gravitate towards, right? But I would go towards, in my opinion, where you get the best experience. Sometimes that means going smaller or kind of creating your own path. So
Well, it's interesting because in there you talked about people that you met along the way
Mhm.
and the networking. And students often ask, is it better if I could get a job on the West Coast and then I move back to the East Coast? Is it better if I just stay in one spot? Is it better for bigger or smaller? And I wonder if it feels to me like some of the success you've had is learning from interesting people along the way and kind of networking. And obviously I know you're super likable. So that probably was
Thank you.
one of your keys.
Well, I think it all comes down to, finding an opportunity where people will invest in you as well. And sometimes you can get that in a more organized, like way with a larger analyst training program or like, out of business school into a program with like all the steps built in with mentorships and stuff. But sometimes that's also just aligning yourself with, your people that really kind of are interesting, have had track record and are building something new and coming in, not having everything figured out, but knowing that like it's going to be a really interesting experience.
And do you think it helped you? Because another question I get all the time right now, credit is hot, people are getting offers on the debt side, but I really want to be on the buy side. Do you think that that will happen for me? Do you see people freely moving back and forth? And I find it's a hard move to make, but I'm just curious maybe it made you feel differently about the move having done it.
A lot of folks, in today's world are getting so specialized, right? Like I started again as a very generalist in PE and real estate and credit. That gave me a well-rounded background. But as you're getting further and further in your career, I think being a specialist is clearly where capital is flowing to. I mean, there's a lot of great generalist funds, mostly the bulge bracket type funds that are getting the allocations today, the product specialist. But being the in between middle market manager, excuse me, is the toughest part today in the market, like a generalist middle market fund manager. So to me, I think like, early in your career, if you can get a broad set of experience, it's great. And don't worry about like what it is. Just go for the quality of the people firstly, and then organization in my mind.
I find that when in the middle of people's careers is when people often struggle the most because it's, what the expression like what got you here won't get you there. So people who are great at doing the work but don't aren't confident and believing in themselves. But I mean, look, it's obviously easy to look back and say it was easy for you because you did it right, but it's
Nothing's easy.
nothing's easy, right? So, what was it like going from when you were kind of like the person doing the work, doing the spreadsheets? Like, how did you transition into the leader that you are today?
I think it's something that you grow into, right? Like it's happened kind of more naturally as obviously as you're getting more experience in your career, you're starting to lead deal teams, you're starting to like overall lead strategy development and whatnot. But it's just the reps. I think you have to do the reps. You gotta start from the ground up and really pay your dues. I think the part as well as taking risk early in your career might be a good way of looking at it. Like take the role here at Arden, what it is today. I mean, that was not the role that I joined for. I came on board really to buy some industrial assets and scale to a portfolio and sell. And we ended up building a company along the way. So that happened organically. And as you're kind of growing in that role, you're hiring people. Don't be afraid to hire people who are smarter than you in their function because they build you up. Like it's something that we really have been fortunate to find an executive team that gels really well together. You've hired someone in our role for us there. I mean, it's working out great. So it's just it's really important that you're surrounding yourself with high IQ people, but also really good people that have a good way of working together.
I love that. And I think that the hiring philosophy of bringing in great people around you, it's easy to say, but oftentimes people building up a company have an ego and they're afraid of being surrounded by people who are going to question them. But I do believe it is a trait of a real leader who builds a successful company. So I'm sure there were moments in time when you hired people that it was hard for you to have them all around, but looks like it worked out pretty well. So that's great.
Yeah, for a company of our size, we're a pretty flat organization too, and we're pretty spread out. The leaders of the company are kind of between New York, where I sit. Our CEO, Barb, sits in Newport Beach, and then the rest of the group is kind of split between Dallas and Philly. So like we don't see each other every day. It works out really well for kind of the assets that we own, which are spread out, throughout the country anyway. But you got to have a good way of communicating with your team, and that could be virtual, but the offsites and time together is really important too. I find for the younger staff though, having a presence in a market where people do sit is important. Because we don't have anybody here, for example, in New York with me, because it wouldn't have been a good fit for them, right? Like they wouldn't be learning enough with their peers surrounding them. So like we have more of that hub in Dallas and in Philly. Because I think that group really does need to be closer in with like their day to day kind of, you know, VP or whatnot, the person ahead of them.
Right. That ability to learn from
Yeah.
the folks that
Yeah.
are around you
It's
is
an
so
apprenticeship
important.
still. Yeah, this is definitely an apprenticeship.
And it is interesting to watch, and I think it happens more today than it did maybe 20 years ago, where companies are having multiple locations, but keeping the core characteristics and traits and feeling and culture of an organization when you have multiple locations can't possibly be easy.
It's a constant challenge, I think, for any company. I mean, what I think we've done well with that is just hiring really complementary people, right? With like good backgrounds that fit well together and as a individual really add to the team. I think that's been an important part because like there's stuff that like, our CFO knows that just like she's an expert at that stuff and like really adds like, same in our head of asset management or acquisitions. And it's just being really complementary to each other. But it is different when you're spread out. Like you have to make a conscious effort to be well connected and constantly talk virtually over the phone or whatnot, right? Like it's and travel. I'd be willing to travel.
Are there skills that you're seeing in kind of the next generation coming up that you think are key skills that people should be honing in on to be successful? Is there anything you see maybe? I find they kind of, there's like a little like language amongst themselves. And I often try to tell people like, nothing beats hard work, but I'm wondering like, are there any skills that you see that you think are critical for long-term success?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, especially with the backdrop of all AI happening today, right? Like you're seeing a lot of companies, even smaller organizations like us, experimenting with that and then being very open to ideas there. Clearly, like that generation that is growing up now is going to be more native to it. Like those are the tools that they will need to master, much like, we had to do back in the day with Excel and Argus and whatnot. I mean, like still relevant tools today. I don't think that go away, but to to a big extent, like just being more efficient with your AI kind of learning and how you think about that kind of processing and technology aspect, that's key. The part of connecting with people though is also something that you got to learn, right? And that may be a little harder for them because I see it with my kids too. It's so easy to get on your devices and be busy with that. So it's just learning how to communicate, and that often has to be face to face. So picking up the phone and walking through a problem, like sometimes you can resolve it in a minute, and it would take so many emails or whatnot to get done.
Nothing shines the mirror on you than better than watching your kids go
Yeah.
through it. Because you see all of the ups and the downs in them, and you're like, "No, don't do that," or so that is the great equalizer, I always say.
For sure, for sure. It is scary to think how good they're gonna be in technology, though. Like just growing up with it so natively is just ingrained in them, right?
When I look at what's happening in AI today, and I'm sure I don't even know the half of it, but when I look at it, it is always a little bit daunting and a little bit exciting, but I feel like my kids are both in college and like it's just second nature to them. So it's
Oh
so
yeah,
fascinating to me how they use it and what they do. And I don't know, I feel like no matter what I do, I'm behind everyone else.
yeah. But I think this, certainly growing up and writing IC memos again, like that used to be a lot more painful. I think back in the day. Now, like that stuff turns out so much faster because you can have AI do a first draft for you, and now you're editing that. So your baseline is always like a little higher almost. Like you don't have to do the first draft. Like you're getting the first draft.
Right, right. It's like having the greatest intern in the world
Exactly.
put together
Yeah.
the baseline documents. I actually had one young girl on my team, and this was just made me chuckle. She said to me, we were talking about something and how hard something was to do a couple of years ago, and she said, "Right, I forgot you worked before AI." And I was like, "Yeah, just a little."
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being such a great guest, and I hope you're ready. I don't do as good a job as Chris, but you've just entered the hot seat. So welcome to that. Couple fun lightning round type questions would love to ask you. First, easy, do you have a favorite book or podcast?
I've been more on Blinkist. I don't know if you know that app, but like I tend to read that more right now as I'm busier, like just snippets of books as opposed to a whole book. I haven't been able to sink my teeth into a whole book in a while, but I do try to go through a couple Blinkist throughout the week, to at least get the book summaries.
I love that. Anything you'd recommend?
I go pretty broad. Like I'll go from fiction and nonfiction, business books to whatever, but like I just get a little flavor of it all. Yeah. And I do read the papers. I like to read both the Times and the Journal to start the day on an app, but yeah.
Right. It's nice to get the differing opinions,
Yeah,
see
yeah.
what you're starting with. I often find that successful people have a specific morning routine that they go through. Do you have anything that kind of grounds you for the day? Or anything like morning routine wise that you might want to talk about?
I wish I would saying like I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and hitting the gym and being super efficient. Like but my day starts with family. I generally make breakfast for the kids as they wake up, get them off to school, walk the dog, and then start the day in the office. So it's kind of that routine that grounds me. Having done the commute into the city a ton in my early days of the career, I mean, like getting up and not seeing the kids going into the city before they're up and getting home when they're already in bed. Like I enjoy that fact of like being able to actually get them off on the bus or getting them to school. So that's been a great experience for me in the last couple of years here, especially as I'm more remote today.
Oh, that's nice. How old are your kids?
10 and 13.
Those are great ages.
Yeah, yeah, they're fun ages.
And what is interesting is as they start to get a little bit older and then they kind of blend into the age of the junior people that you're hiring, you
Oh yeah.
realize how little the people out of college coming in know, and you're like, "Wait a minute, these are just," yeah, so which leads me to my next question is, when you're hiring someone, is there anything in particular that you look for? Any questions you ask? Anything that kind of tips you off like this person's gonna be good?
I think it's more grit. I like to find people that have overcome, some level of adversity or just have been able to stick to to something. So that can mean an athlete. It could mean someone who's in a position where you didn't expect them to be. Like, they had to go through hoops to get there. Just the adaptability to change is so important in our world today. And I find that like you need grit to really survive and do well in this business. So like we hire for that in particular. Like you gotta have the credentials, the smarts and whatever, but like everybody starts with that baseline.
Right, and there are things you can learn and there are things you cannot learn, and
Yeah.
so I agree with that. And so none of us do this alone. Are there any mentors that have had, I mean, obviously we talked about you kind of networking early in your career, but are there any mentors that have had a big impact on you and getting you to the successful place where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, throughout, I mean, find an organization, whether it's, your school, whether it's ULI, just
Love you all.
networking within like your real estate club. It's even too many to name, but like, yeah, you don't build this alone, right? Nobody achieves anything of meaningful scale or success alone. So it's just even former bosses. Like I still am in contact with a lot of my former colleagues and former bosses and like still lean on them for a lot of input.
That's great. It must mean you were a good leaver because that's one I did a whole podcast recently with somebody about like how do you exit a company and it's never easy.
It's
But
never
being able
easy.
to exit and still take those mentors with you to me shows you did it right.
I hope I did, but I guess we'll find out. But yeah, I think over time, having made transitions, you realize it's like a really small world. People circle back in real estate pretty frequently.
The real estate world is super incestuous. It always surprises me how you see the same people. And I was in San Francisco last week, and the same people from New York were there, probably escaping the cold like me. But it is a small group. You have to kind of watch what you say and how you say it.
Yeah, New York real estate especially. So we've been lucky to work in the New York market in real estate, the Bay Area as well. But yeah, it's certainly, I've also seen a common theme now of what was maybe a local market, like it's really becoming national, right? Like talent goes with various groups, but like they're open to hire more nationally now, or roles might be what in the past was like, oh, I need to be in New York only. Now you're hiring for talent, and that talent could sit in Chicago, could sit in Dallas, could sit in Atlanta. Like it's just so much more national. So like you're competing in a way with candidates in a much broader market. So that makes it even more connected, right? Like people that you run into.
Right. I I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. It was really wonderful to have you here. I think there are going to be a lot of people who listen in and appreciate some of your candor. So thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. We're grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com